Discover the 7 incredible hidden principles of Jesus that will change your life forever. Rain poured down like a curtain of tears, blurring the streets of the small town where Sarah lived. She clutched her children's hands, guiding them through the puddles, their laughter piercing the dreary atmosphere. But inside, Sarah felt crushed. Weighed down by the ghost of their father and the burden of 2 jobs, she sought refuge in the old church, hoping for a glimpse of hope as she slipped inside. The scent of worn wood and candle wax enveloped her like an embrace. The pastor spoke, his voice warm yet commanding. Today, we'll explore 7 incredible principles of love, forgiveness, and resilience. Each word wrapped around Sarah's heart, filling the cracks with light. Images of a brighter future flashed in her mind, a life where the past didn't hold her hostage. The message stirred something deep within her, igniting flames of hope she thought had long died. But as she stepped back into the world, doubt and judgment slapped her like the cold rain. The community once known for its unity now whispered about her struggles, her choices. At the diner, the manager threw disdainful glances her way, always reminding her of late shifts and low wages. "You're lucky to have a job," he sneered, tightening the noose of her stress. Day by day, tension built at home, affecting her children's smiles. Sarah felt like she was slipping through the cracks, losing pieces of herself and leaving them scattered behind. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The confrontation at home reached a peak when her estranged mother called after years of silence. Sarah hesitated, the phone clutched tightly in sweaty palms. Their conversation was a tug-of-war of hurt and expectations. Words turned into daggers as she confronted her mother about the years lost to addiction. Each exchange felt like a storm, whipping up anger and frustration, but also a glimmer of understanding. They were both fighting their battles, wrestling with forgiveness. Would the weight of their shared past forever chain them, or could it be the very thing that set them free? In a moment of quiet reflection, Sarah closed her eyes, envisioning a life where judgment didn't suffocate love, a world where their struggles united rather than divided them. Just as a flicker of resolve ignited in her chest, a sudden clash at the church tore her thoughts. A well-meaning but misguided comment from a community member led to an uproar, igniting old prejudices. Sarah's heart raced. She could feel the eyes of a divided congregation on her. Will she harness the strength found in vulnerability? Can she stand tall and echo the teachings that began to fill her life with purpose? As tension simmered and judgments warred, Sarah's plea rang clear, mingling with sparks of hope and palpable anxiety. Will she and her community rally together in the face of despair, or will the unspoken bonds of their struggles further isolate her? With her heart pounding, the question hung in the air: could she change the narrative, or would their judgment draw her into deeper isolation? Sarah's breath hitched as she stood, frozen in the moment. The tension crackled around her, palpable and sharp, like the static before a storm. The whispers of judgment seeped through the cracks of the church walls, wrapping around her throat. She couldn't let it suffocate her. The pastor's voice rose over the murmurs, pleading for calm. "Let us remember," he said gently, "we're called to love one another, regardless of our pasts." His words rang true, but Sarah felt the chains of doubt bind her tighter. The wave of warmth surged through her, mixed with the cool reality of her surroundings. She could see a few familiar faces, neighbors, friends who once supported her but now only glanced at her with pity. Was she still a part of this community, or had she transformed into a shadow of her former self? "Enough," she said, surprising even herself. The murmurs stilled. Her heart pounded, each beat echoing the urgency of the moment. "We all have scars. We carry burdens that weigh us down. But we don't have to face them alone. We can choose to lift each other up instead of tearing each other down." The silence felt suffocating, but Sarah pressed on, finding strength in her vulnerability. I know I've made mistakes. She hesitated and then spoke, recalling the struggles that had brought her to this point. I'm battling every day to create a better life for my children. I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for understanding. The congregation shifted, some faces softening, others hardening in resistance. Old grudges hung like ghostly figures from the rafters, but Sarah could feel something else stirring, a flicker of hope kindling in the room. I want to change, she whispered. I want my children to thrive, to see a community that loves without conditions. Let us be each other's courage. She felt the emotions rise, a wildfire of passion igniting her words. What if we lifted each other as we climb? It's time to break the cycle of judgment and isolation. Together we can turn our pain into purpose. Her plea hung in the air, thick and heavy with possibility. Eyes darted around the room, processing her words. Sarah could see a mix of shock and contemplation. Would they join her, or would her cry echo into silence? She took a step forward, feeling eyes shift to her, the weight of their judgment slowly melting away. And then, unexpectedly, a woman from the back stood up. You're right, Sarah. We've all been through our own battles. I'm sorry I judged you. Her voice broke, and others quickly began to stand, one by one. Me too. Another called, voice shaking. We have to be better. Hope surged within Sarah as murmurs turned into an avalanche of voices, each sharing their own stories, vestiges of pain and healing woven through the fabric of their lives. But in the midst of that rising unity, Sarah's heart still tightened. Would it last? Could they truly embrace love over judgment? Just as the momentum seemed to encompass the room, a man's harsh voice cut through. And what if this is all just an excuse for more mistakes? Her stomach dropped, and a chill raced up her spine. Doubt began to creep back in, threatening to stomp out the flame she had ignited. Would fear overshadow the breakthrough that was just beginning? As she faced the crowd, Sarah felt a rush of warmth from unexpected allies. However, she also felt the tension shift yet again, and the question reverberated in her mind: would she have the strength to face this new challenge, to tip the scales of their fears back toward hope? Sarah stood at the center of the church, the weight of the congregation's eyes on her, each gaze a mixture of sympathy and skepticism. The man who had spoken so harshly leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, his stance a fortress of doubt. His words clung to the air like a fog, heavy and suffocating. She could almost feel the chill they brought as they seeped into the hearts of those around her. Just an excuse for more mistakes, she echoed silently, her pulse quickening. The very idea felt like ice water splashed onto the fire she had just ignited. What if they believed him? What if they turned away from her plea, from their own moment of reckoning? She took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage within her. We can't be afraid to forgive, she declared, her voice sharper now, slicing through the doubt that lingered. That's the only way we heal. The words surged from her chest, fueled by the fire of shared pain and hope. A few heads nodded, but the lingering doubt still hung in the air. It felt like a balance, a seesaw on the verge of tipping. What would you be excusing? She asked, directing her gaze toward the man. The hardest season of your life? The choices that brought you to this moment? We've all fallen short at times. We've all risked repeating our mistakes. What's important is how we choose to move forward. Gasps of agreement rippled through the crowd, surprising even her. She could see them starting to connect with her words, reflecting on their own battles, the shadows that sometimes felt too heavy to bear alone. As she locked eyes with the man, she saw a flicker of something, perhaps curiosity or doubt, shift within him. Maybe her message was getting through, despite the walls he had built. Sarah felt braver, emboldened by the realization. I'm not perfect, she continued, softening her tone. I've stumbled, I've hurt people I care about, and I've hurt myself. But in those moments of darkness, I learned something crucial: we are stronger together. We can help each other face our pasts, not hide from them. A murmur broke out, louder this time, voices mingling in a hum of agreement. I can't be the only one who wants better for our kids, she shouted, who wants a community that embraces love and work towards healing rather than judgment. A few children were listening, wide-eyed in the back corner. She smiled, imagining them growing up in a place where love wasn't overshadowed by fear. The man took a step forward, uncertainty lacing his brow. But what if we keep messing up? His voice wavered but was earnest, holding the weight of his questioning. What if your mistakes teach you to understand others? Sarah shot back, her heart racing. What if they make you the person who can help someone else through their own darkness? I can't promise the path will be easy, but I can promise it will be worth it. His expression shifted, the rigidness of his form relaxing somewhat. She could sense the people around her leaning closer, engrossed in the exchange, each moment pulling them away from the shadows of their pasts. Let us give each other a chance, she urged, glancing at each face. We're gathered here not to hide, but to heal. Something magical began to pulse through the air. It was a collective breath taken in unison. This was the awakening she had hoped for. Would it last? Would the man who had cast doubt serve as a bridge or a barrier to the revival happening in the church? But before she could ponder further, the pastor stepped back, his voice warm with reassurance. It's time for us all to decide, do we walk out of this church unchanged, or do we step into a new chapter? Sarah felt her heartbeat synchronize with the apprehensive excitement rippling through the room. What would tomorrow look like if they chose healing over hurt? Would they face the challenge together? As she watched their faces, painted with fear and determination, one thought clenched in her mind: could they conquer the past to embrace a brighter future? The church hall was silent, a stillness that seemed to draw everyone into its embrace. Sarah could feel the anticipation swelling, thick and palpable. She glanced at the pastor, his kind eyes sparkling with hope. This was a moment of decision, she could sense it coursing through each of them. Speaking of tomorrow, the pastor began, breaking the tension. I encourage each of you to commit to the idea of healing. Let us not just speak about it today and walk away unchanged. Let us take those steps towards forgiveness together. One by one, worshippers started to nod, some even lifting their hands in silent agreement. Sarah caught the gaze of the man who had challenged her. He opened his mouth to speak, a flicker of uncertainty still hanging in the air. Would he be the one to quash this budding unity, or would he help sow the seeds of healing? Forgiveness isn't about excusing the hurt, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's about letting go of the weight so we can stand tall again. His body language softened as he spoke, arms uncrossing, revealing a vulnerability that seemed to surprise even him. A woman near the front gasped softly. Yes, she exclaimed, her voice trembling with emotion. We've been carrying this burden for too long. Encouraged, others began to speak out, their voices weaving a powerful tapestry of shared struggles and aspirations. I want to change, another murmured, tears forming. I want to be the parent my kids deserve. Sarah's heart surged. They were finding their voices. They were ready to take steps toward healing, to embrace vulnerability. She felt like she was witnessing a miracle unfold before her very eyes. Let us imagine a future for our children, Sarah said, taking a step closer to the crowd. What if they grow up knowing only love and acceptance? What if they're taught that mistakes can be stepping stones rather than stones thrown in their path? The atmosphere inside the church was electric. People were leaning forward, eyes brightening at the thought of possibility. The harshness of the past began to melt away, framing the contours of a new way forward. What if we took the message of love and used it as a tool? A voice called out from the back. It was a young father, his struggle obvious in the lines etched around his eyes. What if we show our kids that it's okay to be human? A wave of murmurs followed, encouragement bubbling up as they started to share their own stories, tales of regret, longing, and dreams of tomorrow. Suddenly, a young girl's voice pierced through the chorus. But what if healing hurts? She asked, her innocent face etched with worry. What if it's too hard? The room fell into an enveloping quiet once more. Sarah felt her chest tighten at the rawness of the question. She remembered moments of deep pain and the bravery it took to face them. It will hurt, sweetheart, she said gently. But out of that hurt can come strength. We're not aiming for perfection, just connection. As more voices chimed in, sharing fears and hopes, the man from the back stepped forward once again. Maybe it starts with trust. Can we trust each other enough to face our truths? He looked around the room, challenging them all to look into their own hearts. The tension in the air was transformed into a current of hope. Sarah watched as the congregation leaned into the idea of trust, of laying down their burdens together. With every passing moment, her belief that they could embrace change grew stronger. But deep inside, a new concern began to twist in her mind. Was this enough? Could a single moment of vulnerability spark enduring change in their community? Before she could dwell on it, the pastor's voice rang out once more. This is just the beginning, he said, the warmth enveloping everyone like a hug. Let us commit to a journey, together. And with that, a new chapter was opening. But what lay ahead? Would their shared hope prove strong enough to conquer the trials they would inevitably face? Sarah felt an overwhelming mix of anticipation and fear at what was to come. Would they truly stand united against the past, or would doubts creep in to unravel everything? As the evening sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the church hall in shades of gold, the air buzzed with nervous energy. Sarah could sense the cautious excitement rippling through the crowd. Each face held a story just waiting to be shared, a truth longing to be expressed. After the pastor's announcement, the chairs shifted as people began to stand, likely buoyed by the collective faith that had built up. They stepped closer, shifting their weight from one foot to the other, as if preparing themselves to share their burdens. I've made mistakes. A soft voice broke through the murmurs. It was a teenage girl, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. I hurt my friends. I thought I could just ignore them and things would get better, but they didn't. A mother in the front row reached out, placing a comforting hand on the girl's shoulder. You're not alone, she whispered, her voice thick with empathy. The crowd leaned in, encircling the girl with warmth, encouraging her to continue. I just want to tell them I'm sorry, the girl admitted, tears shimmering on her lashes. But what if they don't forgive me? Sarah felt her heart ache as she remembered being that girl, the fear of rejection, the desire to set things right. What if you reached out? It's scary, but sometimes that's the first step, she called out, her voice strong despite the quiver in her chest. You may be surprised how many people are ready to forgive. Forgiveness is powerful. An older gentleman with silver hair chimed in. It doesn't mean you forget the hurt. It means you choose to move forward. A man at the back raised his hand, eyes glistening with unshed tears. I lost my brother to the streets, he said, voice breaking. For years, I blamed him, but I never told him I loved him. I waited too long. Gasps of compassion rippled through the crowd, and Sarah felt the weight of each confession settle in the room. The air was heavy with regret and longing, but also courage. People were opening doors to their hearts, revealing cracks they had covered for too long. Maybe it's time to unlock those doors, Sarah encouraged. To speak out, to embrace the truth of what we feel. It's hard, but it's necessary. Just then, the young girl spoke again. But how do we start? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question lingered in the air, echoing the thoughts in many minds. Maybe we gather our stories, the older gentleman suggested, nodding toward the pastor. Write them down. Share them. When we put our truths into words, we start the healing process. Nods of agreement rippled through the crowd, enthusiasm brightening their faces. It was a simple yet profound idea, each story forming a thread in the tapestry of their collective healing journey. As the pastor offered input, Sarah's heart swelled with hope. She could see the spark igniting in everyone's eyes. They were ready to brave the trials ahead together, ready to turn pain into purpose. Yet, a nagging voice echoed in Sarah's mind. Was it enough to simply speak? Or would the weight of the past find its way back into their hearts, threatening to unravel the fragile progress they'd begun? As the church lights dimmed to embrace the intimacy of the moment, Sarah took a deep breath, heart racing with both excitement and concern. They were at the precipice of a new journey. She could feel it in her bones, but deep down, She sensed another storm brewing. Would they truly find healing? Or would the paths they had walked become too hard to shake off? The next steps being whispered in the hall felt weighty and substantial, but as they gathered inspiration, the bigger question loomed. What would they do when the first real test of their unity emerged? The air was thick with anticipation as the pastor stepped to the front once more. His presence was a steadying force, but Sarah's heart raced. The room was alive with murmurs, a blend of hope and trepidation. Whatever journey they had begun that evening, it felt monumental. "Let us take a moment to write," the pastor said, pulling out a stack of paper and pens. Instantly, the rustling of papers filled the hall, transforming the space from a moment of shared vulnerability to personal introspection. Each person, including Sarah, found their own quiet corner, ready to lay bare their stories. She sat at a table, pen poised above the blank page. But for a moment she struggled. How could she put her truth into words? She thought back on her own heartaches, the friendships that had slipped through her fingers, the words left unspoken. Closing her eyes, she took a deep breath, letting it carry the weight of her regrets. The smell of fresh ink filled the air, grounding her as she began to write. A little at first, each sentence spilling out like the grains of sand in an hourglass. Across the room, she glanced at the teenage girl still fidgeting but now biting her lip fiercely as she scribbled down her thoughts. Sarah wanted to reach out, to remind her that she was in good company, but she knew this was a personal journey. Moments passed, and silence enveloped them. The only sound was the scratching of pens on paper. It was soothing, almost like a heartbeat, a collective rhythm of healing. Sarah could feel the tension ease just a bit, replaced by an electricity of communion. Each story, a thread weaving them closer together, creating an invisible network of support. As they finished, the pastor invited everyone to share what they had written, if they felt comfortable. A few brave souls stepped up. The teenage girl cleared her throat and shared her unfinished letter about friendship and her regret over lost time. The older gentleman spoke about his brother, emphasizing his love that went unsaid. Each word gave flight to the shadows, revealing the struggle to forgive, to be forgiven. But then, a subtle shift rippled through the room. A woman in the back, voice trembling, stood up. I was running from my own past," she confessed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I left my family because I thought they would be better off without me. I did terrible things." Gasps filled the air, and Sarah felt like the walls were closing in. It was heavy, this moment. The weight of her own struggles bubbled up inside her. Selfishness, cowardice, the guilt of abandoning loved ones, it was all too real. But it was also a chance, and she could almost hear the unspoken call to rise from it. "Maybe we can support each other, share what we really want to change," Sarah blurted, her heart pounding. "What if we make a promise together?" Silence followed her words. Every person's gaze turned to her, unsure but intrigued. A commitment to reach out, to make amends, to forgive not just others, but ourselves? Heads nodded, and a flame of solidarity ignited among them. In that moment, they shared more than stories. They shared a determination to move forward together. As Sarah looked around, she felt a mix of compassion and responsibility. Could they truly uphold this promise? Would her own fears threaten to derail their shared journey? The question lingered, heavy in the air. Then, she saw it, the glimmer of possibility in the eyes surrounding her, each spark lighting the way forward. They had started something powerful, but doubt crouched in the corners of her mind. Just as she began to believe, a shadow flickered at the edge of her thoughts. What awaited them outside the comforting walls of that church hall? The first real test was coming, and all she could do was brace herself for whatever lay ahead. The pastor smiled gently, encouraging them to take a few deep breaths. "Let us remember, each of us brings something unique to this circle. Your voice matters, your story matters." His words wrapped around Sarah like a warm embrace, but they weren't enough to quell the storm brewing inside her. With a heavy heart, Sarah watched the others nod and murmur in agreement, each face a canvas of emotion. The teenage girl had her eyes bright with determination, and the older gentleman now leaned forward, as if ready to defend the fragile promise they had woven. "Let us put faith into action," the pastor suggested, a flicker of urgency in his voice. "Tomorrow, let us meet again. But this time let us commit to sharing one act of kindness. Something small, something that impacts your relationship with someone around you." A ripple of excitement chased away some of Sarah's doubt. An act of kindness simple yet profound. She thought about the elderly neighbor she'd seen struggling with her grocery bags last week. Maybe she could help her carry them next time. The pastor continued, explaining how small acts could build into bigger changes. "Even the smallest candles can light up the darkest places," he said, and his words resonated deeply with Sarah. But as she glanced at the woman who had shared her painful confession, another worry hit her. What if her act of kindness wasn't enough? What if it wasn't what the woman or others needed? After the meeting, as everyone began to gather their things, Sarah lagged behind. She caught sight of the woman who had opened up. Tears still glistened on her cheeks, and the gentle crease of sadness on her face tugged at Sarah's heart. "Hi," Sarah said, stepping closer. "I just wanted to say you're really brave for sharing your story." The woman looked up, surprised. "You think so?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Definitely. I don't know if I could do that," Sarah admitted, her voice shaky. "You're not alone in this." The woman nodded, and for a moment, they shared something unspoken, an understanding. Sarah felt a sense of connection. Perhaps what she feared the most, vulnerability, was actually a doorway to compassion. They were weaving the beginning of a lasting bond. More than words, it was comforting knowing they could help one another, even if they hadn't figured it all out yet. But as they parted ways that night, a sudden pang of anxiety rose in Sarah again. What if the kindness they planned to show wasn't enough to heal the wounds they all wore inside? The following day, Sarah awoke to a gray sky and a lingering sense of uncertainty. As she glanced at her phone, she noticed a message from the teenager. "I'm scared. What if I can't do this?" Sarah's heart ached for her. What they were attempting felt monumental. Could she really help the girl face her fears? What if all of this came crashing down? Determined, she picked up her pen and notebook, deciding the best way forward was to write down her own story of fear and hope. As her pen scratched the surface of the paper, she couldn't shake the feeling that the comfort they had found together was about to be tested in ways none of them could predict. Her phone buzzed again. It was the pastor message. "Remember, compassion starts in the simplest of places." But what would happen if their earnest intentions collided with the harsh realities of their lives? Sarah pressed her lips together, ready to dive deep into the unknown. She felt that palpable tension in her chest once more. The first challenge of their promise loomed near, and she knew she had to step up. Would she rise to the occasion? Would they all? Tomorrow would tell a test of spirit, a challenge to connection. As she stepped away from the window and gathered her courage, she couldn't ignore the question lingering in the back of her mind. Would her story end in healing or heartbreak? The morning dawned, muted and uncertain. Sarah pulled on her jacket and stepped outside into the damp air, clutching her notebook close. Each step toward her neighbor's house felt heavier than the last. Her stomach twisted in knots. She was about to embark on her act of kindness, but doubt clouded her mind. What if Mrs. Henderson didn't want help? What if she didn't recognize Sarah's gesture? As she approached the faded blue door of Mrs. Henderson, she took a deep breath and knocked softly. The sound echoed through the silence, a timid yet hopeful plea. Moments ticked by before the door creaked open slightly, revealing Mrs. Henderson's weathered face. "Sarah, what a pleasant surprise," the elderly woman said, her voice warm but laced with weariness. "What brings you here today?" I saw you struggling with groceries the other day," Sarah stammered, heat creeping into her cheeks. "I wanted to see if you needed some help." Mrs. Henderson's blue eyes sparkled at the suggestion. "That's very kind of you, dear. I do appreciate a helping hand." As Sarah stepped inside, she felt an almost palpable sense of relief wash over her. The two women began chatting, Mrs. Henderson sharing stories about her garden and the recent changes in the neighborhood, each word knitting a tighter bond between them. Meanwhile, Sarah found herself listening intently, comforted by the rhythm of their conversation. They were both learning from one another, stitches in a larger quilt of humanity. As they moved to gather the bags from the car, laughter bubbled from them, shattering the barriers that had once felt so foreboding. Back in the house, after unloading groceries, Sarah noticed a collection of photographs on the mantel. Pictures of family, the faces of children and grandchildren sparkled with joy. "Your family looks lovely," Sarah remarked, and Mrs. Henderson's smile widened. "Yes, they're my greatest treasures," she said, her tone soft. For a moment, sadness clouded her expression. "But they're busy, and sometimes I feel a bit forgotten." At that moment, Sarah felt something shift. Vulnerability, like an uninvited guest, slipped into the room. The words Mrs. Henderson spoke echoed Sarah's own fears about being seen and heard. Being forgotten can feel so heavy, Sarah confessed, the weight of her own fears spilling out. "I worry sometimes that I won't be enough for my friends, or that they'll drift away." Mrs. Henderson looked at her with understanding. "It's in our nature to doubt ourselves. But, dear, sharing kindness like you're doing now, it opens doors. You're reminding others they're not alone." Something inside Sarah began to bloom. It was as if the act of kindness was already weaving its magic, bridging the gap between them. Later that afternoon, as she walked home, a new spark ignited within her. She felt empowered, transformed even. Perhaps they were all searching for that same connection, and perhaps her fears would evolve into something beautiful, something they could all share. When she reached home, another message blinked on her phone. It was from the teenager. "I did it. I helped someone today." A smile burst onto Sarah's face, merging with the glow of hope she carried. In that moment, she realized that while they were all fumbling through their fears, they were also lighting candles in the dark, igniting sparks of change. But would their collective spark be enough to illuminate the shadows of their hidden pains, or would they be blindsided by the weight of their struggles? As the day turned to dusk, the uncertainty of tomorrow loomed ahead. Darker than the twilight sky, would fear hold them back, or would they find courage to face what lay ahead? That evening, the world painted in strokes of deep purples and soft oranges. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of something monumental. Flopping onto her couch, she stared at the flickering shadows on the wall. Her mind swirled with the daunting echo of Mrs. Henderson's words about feeling forgotten. It stirred an ache in her chest. She found it painfully relatable. Her phone buzzed again. It was her friend, Jenna, inviting her to a gathering. "It'll be fun. Just a few friends hanging out. Come join. You need this." But Sarah hesitated. The thought of superficial small talk made her stomach twist. What if they didn't want to hear her feelings? What if they drifted away, just like her fears whispered? Before she could overthink, Sarah replied with a thumbs-up emoji, her heart racing. Maybe this was it, the chance to share her newfound connection, the courage she felt spark between herself and Mrs. Henderson. Later, as she walked into Jenna's crowded living room, the laughter and chatter washed over her. A warm blanket she wasn't sure she deserved. She spotted familiar faces, but in that moment, they all felt distant. The weight of her worries pressed on her shoulders like a heavy backpack. Amidst the jovial noise, she felt alone, a peculiar mix of fear and hope. "Sarah, over here." Jenna's voice rang out, cutting through her thoughts. A smile exploded on Sarah's face. Jenna was a beacon, someone who always made her feel seen. She pushed through the room and joined her friend, who was animatedly chatting with a few others as they settled into conversation. Sarah found herself drifting in and out, her mind often wandering back to Mrs. Henderson and the inspiration she had felt today. She wanted to share what she had learned. The littlest things could make a huge difference. Just simple kindness. Instead, she laughed along, but felt a gnawing disappointment at her inability to connect deeper. Suddenly, one of her friends, Mark, waved over. "Hey Sarah, did you hear what happened to Tessa? She's going through a tough time." They all leaned in as Tessa revealed her struggles with anxiety. As she spoke, the room quieted. The once vibrant energy turned somber, weighted by shared concern. In that moment, Sarah felt it, a pull in her heart. She spoke up, feeling that newfound connection with Mrs. Henderson bubble to the surface. You know, I've experienced feeling alone, like no one truly sees you. This morning, I helped Mrs. Henderson, and it made me realize that being there for each other is so important. Everyone listened, their eyes wide, in that intimate space of vulnerability. Mark nodded earnestly. Yeah, man, sometimes we forget how we're all in this together. As the conversation unfolded, tales of struggle and hope began to fill the air. Little by little, the atmosphere shifted, courage blossomed into a shared bond. Stories became threadbare connections, and smiles began to light up weary faces. But then Sarah caught Jenna's gaze. There was a flicker of concern mixed with admiration. It made Sarah's heart race. What if she hadn't just aided her own healing but had opened a door, one that would lead to more shared fears and honest connections? As the night carried on, laughter soon returned, but the deeper threads of their conversations remained. What had started as casual talk had transformed into the kind of connection that made the fear of being forgotten seem less heavy as Sarah headed home. Uncertainty tangled with hope in her mind. Had she ignited something that could still be cultivated? Would they all keep leaning on each other? The night was still young, and the horizon glowed with the promise of tomorrow. Just then, her phone chimed again. This time a photo message from the teenager. We should do this again. A bubble of warmth blossomed in Sarah's heart. Yet another flicker of doubt crept in. Was this just a fleeting moment or the beginning of something enduring? Tomorrow would tell. The morning sun peeked through Sarah's curtains, spilling golden light across her room. She took a deep breath, feeling a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Today was not just another day. It was the first gathering after their promise to embrace kindness and vulnerability. She pulled on her favorite sweater, the one that always made her feel brave, and set off to the church. As she entered, the atmosphere buzzed with energy. The air was thick with conversations and tentative laughter. People were engaging with one another, sharing small moments of their week, and Sarah's heart swelled. Maybe this was the change they'd all been hoping for. The pastor smiled genuinely as he welcomed everyone. Today marks the beginning of something special, he said, his eyes scanning the room. Let us talk about our experiences with kindness over this past week. Who wants to share? Sarah felt a pang of shyness but mustered the courage to raise her hand. I can go, she said, clearing her throat. I helped my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, with her groceries. A wave of familiarity washed over her as familiar faces turned toward her. The room erupted with murmurs of approval. The teenager, who had been so anxious the week before, shouted, "That's awesome." Sarah, encouraged by their warmth, she continued, "It was a small act, but it felt so good to connect. We talked about how sometimes we all feel forgotten. It reminded me that kindness opens doors for healing." As she shared, others nodded, and she could see the light of understanding in their eyes. The older gentleman stood next, recounting a simple gesture of returning a lost item to a neighbor, and how grateful the person was. Sometimes it's the little things that mean the most, he added, voice thick with emotion. One by one, others spoke up, forming a chorus of shared experiences, each story weaving a tighter bond amongst them. The air shimmered with inspiration, transforming doubt into courage. Sarah felt that electric current of connection, stronger than she ever expected. This was real. They were breaking barriers together. Then, a hesitant voice broke the current of stories. A woman who had shared her struggles the week prior, her brow knitted with concern. But what if we fall back into old habits? She asked, fear evident in her tone. A heavy silence hung in the air, but Sarah felt the weight of the question resonate with her, like a drumbeat. She knew the fear of slipping back, of losing the progress they'd made. We will face challenges, she began, her voice steady. But it's about remembering we're not alone, and that we can always lift each other back up. Heads nodded around her, reassurance blooming in the room. The pastor chimed in, remember, we're all works in progress. Kindness doesn't erase our past, but it can guide us toward a brighter future. The conversation shifted toward practical steps they could take to keep this momentum alive, to continue nurturing the bonds they had formed. Plans were quickly made: monthly community cleanups, gatherings to share their stories, and outreach to those who felt isolated. The energy built as laughter and excitement filled the church once more. Sarah couldn't help but grin. But amidst the joy, she felt a faint worry twinge in her chest. Would they really stick to it? Would they have the strength to face the moments of doubt when they inevitably arose? As the meeting came to an end, a little girl who had been quietly listening approached Sarah, clutching a piece of paper. "I made this for you," she said shyly, extending the drawing of a bright sun. "It's to remind you that kindness shines light, even on cloudy days." Sarah's heart melted, filled with gratitude. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This is beautiful." That was the moment it hit her. Healing wasn't just about the big acts. It was the small ones too, the little reminders, the connections sparked by vulnerability. She realized they were laying the foundation for something solid. A community stitched together by empathy and kindness as they stepped outside, basking in the warmth of shared laughter. Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. Today had marked a turning point, not just for her, but for everyone around her. They were all embracing the idea of showing up for each other, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. She breathed in deeply, feeling the brisk air fill her lungs, full of possibilities. No matter what would come, she knew they would face it as a united front, stronger together. In that shared commitment to kindness, hope ignited, lighting the path to a brighter, more compassionate future. And just then, the sun burst forth from behind the clouds, illuminating the world with warmth and emblematic promise that love and resilience would always find a way through the darkest days. So, what are you waiting for? This is the moment to make a difference. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that can change lives. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help more people discover the power of transformation. We want to hear from you, so comment your reactions and feelings about this inspiring ending below. And don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to embrace their journeys of healing and hope. Together we can spread kindness and ignite change.